those instances, we all have something to draw our ideal customer in. Whether it's a quilt hanging if you're selling quilts, or it's a quilt to get quilters to come in to talk to you about the patterns.
Mm-hmm. Welcome to Quilting on the Side, the podcast where we uncover the secrets to turning your passion for quilting into a profitable side hustle.
I'm Tori from the Quilt Patch by Tori.
And I'm Andi from True Blue Quilts. And together we're your co-hosts on this exciting journey of creativity, entrepreneurship, and all things quilting.
We're here to help you navigate the world of quilt pattern design, course creation, digital marketing, and running an online quilt business. We've been through the ups and downs ourselves, so we know what it takes to make money from your favorite hobby.
Welcome back to Quilting on the Side. Today we want to share some of our personal experiences with vending at quilt shows. So part of the relationship between Tori and I was our experience sharing a booth at QuiltCon. So Tori, tell us what you remember about that experience. It's been a couple years and a lot has happened since then.
Yes, a lot has happened. I remember being really excited. You reached out to me, if I remember right, and you asked, hey, QuiltCon is coming to Phoenix this year. And I, at the time, was living in Southern Arizona, and you were in the greater Phoenix area. So it was really close to us. And you asked if we all wanted to split a booth. And this was the first show after COVID had shut it down. So we were pretty excited. And of course, I said yes. At the time, though, I don't remember how far along I was, but I was pregnant. And by the time the show was rolling around, I would be 8 months pregnant. But you were willing to work with me. And I remember us coming up with, we had a bunch of planning meetings beforehand, made sure that we worked out the details on how big booth we're going to get, how big the booth was going to get. And I remember us pulling up, I had a piece of paper I brought up with a Sharpie, and we were drawing out our layout so we could have your stuff is going to be on this side, my stuff is going to be on this side, but we need something in the middle. How are we going to work that? And we had several conversations leading up to the event. And then when we got there, I remember I've never met you in person. So this is the first time I met Andi in person, was at QuiltCon. I show up, it's me and my 3-year-old because I didn't have anyone to watch him. And my husband was going to come up the next day to get him, but he was going to hang out with me for 24 hours. And then my mom and her friend, if I remember right, met us. And I know my sister was there, but I can't remember if she came later because they're all in California. Everybody came and was like supporting our booth, and we got it set up. And I was so relieved to see you when I got there because, man, that back, the back of the
loading dock, dock situation was crazy. And even some very experienced vendors were upset about the way the convention center works, because there's a lot of moving parts, because you have the staff of the actual facility, and then you have the staff of the show, the organizers, and then you have all the individual vendors who are trying to get in and out and figure things out and get set up. And as a very small independent, luckily we had the partnership, so both of us could kind of tag team the various issues. But yeah, it's quite an experience to see the behind the scenes as the blank warehouse type area gets transformed into the vendor retail space and the actual show with all the quilts hanging. So that was fun. I remember
everyone being in a hurry. But everyone was very polite, like for the most part. They were very polite. There was hardly any honking, which I was very impressed with downtown Phoenix. Like right. There was a lot of construction right outside the convention center. I remember that because it was hard to get in the door. Like we had to be there on time. We can't be late.
Right, because they give you specific setup times to come in. You have a certain window, and then part of the frustration was the one person from the convention center that seemed to be in charge of the loading dock, like wasn't letting people into the space. And so there was some disconnect there on the communication, but it all got resolved. Luckily, you and I being a fairly small enterprise, we had a few bins of supplies and quilts to hang up, and we were able to get that done pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think our military experience came into play there with all our packing and being able to unload efficiently and reload efficiently. I think we hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah, and that definitely goes to the importance of spending time planning all the way down to those small details. So you mentioned your diagram. You definitely want to think about where everything is going to go, how many tables or racks or grid wall setups that you're going to want to display things, the ease of a checkout point for people to purchase their items, and the space and the different quilts that you may want to have hung up on the backdrops to make it an inviting space for people to come into.
And seating. I remember seating being a big deal too.
Well, yeah, especially for a pregnant woman. You don't want to be on your feet for that long. So,
yeah, my mom came in handy with the chairs there. She brought camping chairs that were much more comfortable than the chairs they provide. But they also provide, 2 chairs for each table. Is that right? Or 2 chairs for the booth?
I think so, yeah. Those details obviously are going to be worked out and may change with each vending opportunity. So it is a long process. I think we had to apply 6 to 8 months ahead of the show, and then there's a waiting period after you apply, and then you get the notification that you've been accepted. So that's not automatically guaranteed, and it's not a 2 days later you get the yes or no. You may have to wait to hear back from the show, and then they'll start trickling out the details, because I remember there was still, just a few weeks ahead of time, we were still deciding on the electric and the internet and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, just be ready for all those different aspects of the setup as you take on these vending opportunities. And I'll just get this out of the way up front, totally transparent. I've done several shows as a vendor and I have not made money. So I'm very cautious now as I go into vendor opportunities, because I don't know if it's the mix of products I offer, if I haven't done good enough research on the potential audience that there's a disconnect there. But you have to weigh those options. I don't want to discourage anyone, because obviously meeting your customer base in person is going to give you a lot of great information, but there are a lot of costs associated with that vending situation, and you definitely want to keep your profit margin in mind.
I broke even on QuiltCon.
Good.
So almost exactly even.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that worked out. But some of the funds came after the event, I will say, within the next couple of weeks, when I had people sign up for the skill building block of the month, and I had a few people sign up or buy a kit from the show. They saw me at the show and they bought the kit later on. And a few people signed up for the color class a few months later. So it worked out in the end, and I count that as part of making up for the cost, because I do that in either quarterly or sometimes yearly basis, depending on how busy I was for the year. But yeah, I broke even.
Yeah, no, and making those contacts for future bookings is an important aspect, and I don't want to discount that. But I've done some crazy things that weren't directly related to quilting. Like, I had a booth at Pinners Conference, which is like a craft DIY show related to the Pinterest mentality and the Pinterest personalities. So there's all sorts of demo classes and make and take things. And so you have just a great variety of creative opportunities. Like a friend of mine does string art with little nails on wooden plaques, and you wrap the string around. So you've got that. You've got Color Street nail techs. You've got felt gnomes, 3D little crafts, and I'm there trying to sell quilts and patterns, and it was pretty crazy. So
yeah, when I used to sell quilts, I signed up for a couple different vending opportunities. One was a car show, which went pretty good because it was a Star Wars themed car show. It was like Star Wars themed. That's what I remember most about it. And I grabbed a few Star Wars panels and made them into quilts as fast as I could. And I had those hanging up and they drew people in. And I ended up selling mostly baby blankets, but at least I had the Star Wars quilts to kind of draw people in. And I always make a little bit with when I was selling quilts, but it wasn't enough to justify continuing it. So one of the biggest events I had was in Sierra Vista. It was a 3-day event. It was outside and it was in the fall. So in Arizona in the fall, it was really nice weather. And it's an annual event they have every year, and they have all kinds of crafters and makers come. And that was a really great place for me to sell quilts. And I had learned from like that Star Wars vending event and another one I had done in Arizona. God, they go by so fast. It was a really quick one. It was a holiday market. It was a holiday market. So I learned from those two that what I needed to have were little things that they could add on to help make my purchase back. So I used my scraps to make baby toys, like the crinkly little blankets, tag blankets. And I did that. And then I made like pin cushions. I made a couple table runners out of those scraps. I've made pillowcases and little things to go with the baby blankets. And I ended up selling a little more of those little things. But then I also had a book out there about custom quilts. So I was able to kind of draw people in with the book and talk about what else I do. So I make t-shirt quilts. I used to quilt on the long arm, right? So I used to long arm other people's quilts when I lived in Arizona. So I was able to say, hey, do you have a quilt that needs to be long armed? Because they'll come and say, oh, I'm a quilter. I love what you're doing here. I'm like, you're a quilter. That's amazing. Do you have a long armor? So I had that aspect too. So I kind of learned how to, that was a big event for me because I learned how to increases the cart value. Yeah. So I learned that kind of the hard way.
There are so many of those little craft shows. We all know the school down the street is going to have a fall festival, and your church may have a holiday bazaar, and they may allow outside vendors to come in, and so those are generally going to be lower cost, $25 to rent a table at that kind of event. But is that the audience? Are you going to have customers that are willing to buy or be interested in patterns? And so then we have the dilemma: are you selling patterns or are you selling finished objects? Because those audiences may be a little bit different. So in terms of doing some market research and thinking about where you want to put your efforts, that can be a challenge. But I like your idea of leading that conversation down the road if you are able to provide long arm services. I've done that because I have a crazy postage stamp quilt that's the Arizona flag, and people will see that, and quilters may ask if there's a pattern, but like I said, that's a postage stamp quilt. There were 2,000 1-inch squares. No one else is going to be crazy enough. I don't want to write the pattern for someone else to sew 2,000 individual squares. So that's just kind of my conversation starter, because then I can say, if people are admiring it, then yes, we can have the conversation about a long arm service, a custom commission quilt where I do the whole thing start to finish for someone, or I can direct people to other patterns or classes that I may offer. So
That's great to pull out. Yeah, that we all, in all three of those instances, we all have something to draw our ideal customer in. Whether it's a quilt hanging if you're selling quilts, or it's a quilt to get quilters to come in to talk to you about the patterns.
Mm-hmm. You have to have a visually appealing setup. So going back to some of those kind of church bazaar small shows, you obviously are not going to have the backdrops and the pipe and drape is what they call it in the big convention centers that separate all the booths. I've been to craft shows, at the local kind of farmers market setup, and you just have the space on the parking lot that's your area. So you have to you may have to invest in one of the pop-up tent roof setups, or your own quilt rack obviously would work as a boundary for your booth. So some of that pre-planning is going to be important for the actual setup of your booth.
Definitely. And use your height as well as your width. That was one thing I've noticed when there every once in a while around this time there'll be people popping up on Facebook in the quilter groups asking, how do you like my table setup? How do you like my vending setup? And it's like, okay, keep in mind that you want to go up. You don't want to just work with what you've got as like on a table. You want to make sure you've got something that brings their eye up. One thing that I used to do was I did even at QuiltCon, so I had wooden crates. Now, if you're looking at this on YouTube, they're actually right behind me. So these two wooden crates I had gotten, and you can see there's two different colors here. So I had two of these darker wood ones and then one of this lighter one. So what I do is have these two stacked on top of each other like a bookcase and put little items in there to kind of dress it up. And I put a sign or something bigger on the top. So it kind of brought your eye up. And then I would have quilts hanging. And I know that like we've been talking about like hanging up things inside a tent. You can go as simple as having clothes hangers, like the pants hangers. So I went and got a pack of those from Walmart, and that's what I used to hang up my quilts up there. And that was really handy. And then I've also used these boxes to just lay a table runner over and then have like, turn it backwards so that I had a little cubby to hide my water and my phone for running cards and stuff like that. Like I'd have it hiding behind there. So I had my own little cubby in the back. So they come in, they're pretty inexpensive and they add a lot of dimension, and you can paint them different colors, which would be fun. Speaking of packing, at the end of the day, I could throw a bunch of stuff in those and put them in my car. So they are also decorative and utilitarian.
We've talked a lot about the setup and the planning and things for getting into a show. Let's talk about some of those tips and tricks for drawing people in and engaging your customers, because this ties into what you were saying about the follow-up afterwards. Very important to have some kind of opt-in and capture those emails.
We did two really great things for following up after a show. One was our free giveaway. So we had, at QuiltCon in particular, we had a giveaway every day. And what they would do is put in their email and name, and we would email them when they won. And it was just an opt-in, hey, we're giving this away, and it would give us something to talk about. And we were able to talk about your monochromatic book because we were giving away fabric. We had a sponsor. We actually had So Easy Sewing, which isn't a almost local quilt shop in Southern Arizona that I was local to. She sponsored a few of the giveaways. So we were able to kind of bring her name into it and show off like her store, but it gave us an opportunity to talk about our offers and what we've got going on, but it also just got them started talking to us. So we could stop them as they're walking by, and they want to win the free thing, and it was just out there on the table too. So we didn't always have someone standing there trying to engage people. We also let it sit for a while, and they could just walk by, sign up, and keep walking if they want to. But for the most part, those that stopped and signed up came in and looked around at least, or talked to us. Again, I was 8 months pregnant, so my leading thing was like, oh, you must be tired, or oh, good for you for sitting down, or So I talked to them about, I'm pregnant. We're just hanging out here. Like, how are you today?
Yeah.
But it would bring them in because I mostly sat at the back of the booth. So they would come in just to say hi to me. And I was just like, hello. And Andi was great. You're an extrovert, so you were out there always talking to people, bringing them in, asking them questions. And you're right, your quilt, what did you say, 2000 piece?
Yeah, the Arizona flag. Yeah.
That is crazy. Like, if you really take a look at her quilt, it is teeny, like, she's not kidding, teeny tiny little pieces. And it would bring people in to just admire and talk to her. And it was a really fun thing. We also had a quilt giveaway that they could stand in front of a quilt every day and put it on Instagram. And then they would also get an entry to win something different on those days. And then our third thing was
bonus.
We also did demos. I know, we did demos. We were busy. We wanted to bring people in because we knew it was going to be a little bit rough because COVID had shut everything down. We knew that we needed to bring people in. We knew that our big seller were workshops and our patterns. So what we want to do was demonstrate our workshops and our patterns. So that's something that we had out was a demonstration table. We would bring it over. I think we did 3 a day or 4 a day. And every couple hours we traded off where Andi would do one, I would do one. And then we had a theme for each day. So one day we focused on color because I used to do color confidence where I taught the science of color, and Andi has a monochromatic book where she teaches all about how to make monochromatic quilts and how they, well, I mean, you can explain it better than me, but it's a great book. So we had that color combination. Then we had a day where we were demonstrating technique. So like half square triangles and how you can make your own quilts with half square triangles. And it gave me an opportunity to show my patterns for my quilts because a lot of them are half square triangles. Andi had angle play at that point, which was rectangles, which she did a lot of like half square triangle rectangles, not triangles, rectangles. So we had that in common. So we played off each other's offers and strengths and had themes for each little demonstration. And we put a schedule out so that anybody walking by, we could say, hey, make sure you come back for this. Or if they had questions about the color stuff I had out or the books Andi had out, we could say, hey, come back for the demo. We're going to be doing one at this time and this time and this time. Now, there were a few times where we decided not to do a demo because the traffic had slowed down so much that there was nobody walking by. So you will have those times. And during those times, we rested because honestly, 8 months pregnant, right? Well, so we took the time to rest.
Yeah. And any vending situation, you're going to be tired of talking. You're going to be tired of being on your feet. And so it is okay to take a minute to sit down, and you can still, for the 1 or 2 people that may walk by, you can wave and engage them in conversation, but you don't have to feel like you have to perform the demo or, whatever, and be on stage with your bright, cheery outgoingness, especially as a lot of people are introverted, and that is really draining to have to perform for those. But with all those giveaways and demonstrations that we were doing, we really tried to broadcast that on our social media channels. And we would talk it up with our audience before the event. So it's very important to have a strategy and have some posts planned out ahead of the event. And then every single day, putting out a new post, reminding people of the selfie opportunity that we were having for the giveaway, announce the winners, really celebrate all those pieces of the event. And then
we did that live too when we picked a winner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we did that live.
We would go live, and everybody's familiar with people taking videos and doing those kind of broadcast events.
I just had the thought. I just remembered. I'm remembering little bits and pieces. I'm so excited. We also videotaped not videotaped, but went live with one of our demonstrations each. So I did you or recorded you and you recorded me. And that way we put on social media. And then those that were there came and knew more about it because they saw us on video. And it gave us some credibility on our own social media channels showing, hey, we're here and we're teaching live. And it really, I think, video in some ways really brings in an online audience a little bit more than static pictures at an event. So if you can take an opportunity, especially during those times when there are no one really walking by, take those times to tour your booth, to talk about what you're doing there, why you're there, where you are, and even if you want to include the people around you too, especially networking just in your area even.
Definitely. I did take the camera around and previewed your booth neighbors because you're sitting there for 2 or 3 days, and if you've got those kind of face to face, you're looking at the same people across the way, and it's a good opportunity to exchange information and to share audiences, because obviously you can reach someone else's audience base that is maybe new to you. Maybe they have come in from out of state, and you can reach a whole new group. And same thing, introduce your audience to other quilters and other experiences and other techniques. I know the person next to us at QuiltCon had kind of a mariner's compass type medallion style quilt pattern that was very unique and so amazing.
Yeah, I remember that's where I met Brimfield Awakening with her coats, and she has EPP, English paper piecing. So her technique was completely different than anything that we were doing. So that was really fun to see like her dynamic versus our dynamic being all diagonal down the aisle, and like watching her like talk about her coats and her patterns. I think she had it wasn't quite a vest, but it was, a poncho. And that was a big hit. It was a huge hit. And she was hilarious. Like, she was so energetic the whole time. And I was taking like notes while she was talking to people. I'm like, okay, we could talk like this. We could talk like this. Cause introvert for me, I'm like, I don't know how to talk to people all the time. So I did try to use my pregnancy more to be like, I'm pregnant. I'm doing okay. How are you doing?
Talking about some of those intangible aspects and the additional benefits to having a booth, some shows will have teaching opportunities. And during our conversation with Debbie Wendt, she talked about teaching at shows. So that's an additional application process. And those two aspects can be independent of one another, but generally, if you are teaching, they do encourage you to have a booth as well.
Some require you to booth if you want to teach there. So it's
right, and it's going to depend on the size of the show and the aspect, because there are quilt teachers that just go to a show and teach classes, whereas there's other quilt businesses that have that retail aspect as well, and so they'll obviously be set up. But just do your research with these different opportunities. QuiltCon was really interesting because they had a lecture stage on the show floor, and so you could sign up for 15-minute little presentations, lectures. And so I was able to do that and share about monochromatic quilts. So definitely a good way to get your information out there. If you have a class that you could take a little snippet of to break down into some of these more kind of mini lecture opportunities.
I forgot to mention how we followed up with the people who gave us their emails.
Well, we collected the emails from our giveaways, and then it was just, I can remember it was a couple-day process where we were sharing in a Google document and typing in all the names and emails so that we could import them into our email provider. I think that's not something we share. We each have our independent businesses with our email list. But it's important to follow up. And it's really easy because you can just do kind of a show recap and say, it was so nice to connect with you. Thank you for visiting my booth at QuiltCon or, the craft festival, whatever the name of the event was. And, I hope you found some good inspiration, and I'd love to see your projects. If you share, please tag me on social media. Everybody knows those little standard verbiage to use in the emails, but just to connect with your audience and do some follow-up there to say, hey, we just had this event and I'm so glad we were able to connect. So we got 600 emails from that show.
We did. We got about 600 emails. And so I followed up with them, just like Andi said, with an email saying, thank you for joining me. I had a picture of my booth and I had a picture of me and Andi. And I shared what I was going to be sharing moving forward and to ask them if they would like to stay on the email list. And this is what they're going to be getting if they do stay. And I had a lot of people opt out, but out of that 600, at least 50% are still on my email list. So it is still valuable to gather their emails and just say, hey, I have value for you. This is what I'm going to be offering you. If you'd like to stay, I'd love to have you.
Yeah. And yes, it can be an ego hit to see those numbers go down as people unsubscribe, because, there are the people that just, sign up the day of, they just want a chance to win some free fabric and they don't really, want to keep up with your business. But we have to remember we're cultivating those tried and true super fans of our business. And so if they're not the perfect fit for you, let them go, and no hard feelings. The quilt world is very wide and diverse, and we want to connect with the people that want to hear from us.
But all that effort was really paid off.
Yeah, talk about some of the connections you made.
So I shared earlier, we had, I say we a lot, but I had people sign up for courses later on. I've had, now that I pivoted to teaching the teacher, so my course design and workshop design, I've had people hang on from the QuiltCon email list that had just ended up signing up for what we're giving away and, lasted throughout my pivot. And that was really cool because in the email service provider, they have a tag that says QuiltCon. I forget exactly what I labeled it, but it had QuiltCon in it. And I was like, oh, wow, we have a few people that are still here. This is amazing. So it really pays off in the long run to, especially if you are providing workshops, I think, because they can sign up later on. Like they might be interested. They might not be interested after the event. Maybe they had spent all their fun money at the event. So hang on to those people that want to stay and really show them, this is what I do. This is what's coming. And then hopefully they will feel inspired enough to stay and then spend their money with you at a later point. More connections we made were just industry connections. So we had Free Spirit Fabrics visit our booth and show some interest in some of our patterns, which was just exciting to get the opportunity to talk to them. We had Jenny Doan of Missouri Star Quilt Company stop by. I wasn't there. Oh. I missed Jenny, but my mom was like, oh, you missed Jenny Doan. I was like Missouri Star Quilt Company? Jenny Doan? And she's like, yeah.
Yeah, that was so fun because it was just like this buzz through the quilt show as she was walking down the aisle.
It was. So I miss Jenny, but I could have had the opportunity to network with Jenny Doan. So there was some famous people walking around, so you can always connect with them and work with them at a later date. And just having that in-person interaction with someone you want to collaborate with, whether they're famous or not, it really helps solidify the memory of you. So like Brimfield Awakening, if we had both been doing some kind of EPP work, I could have gone over and tried to collaborate with, or just ask her like, hey, like, I love your energy. Because I already shared, I loved her energy. Can we do something together? Unfortunately, I'm not doing EPP, but that's something that you could do is just in the booths around you, really. That's probably your key networking opportunity are the ones around you. And then if you have time to walk up and down the aisles and find more, especially with people that are parallel with your ideal audience. So long armors, if you're just a pattern designer, I shouldn't say just, but if you're a pattern designer, you can collaborate with long armors. You can collaborate with like me and Andi who do color. You can collaborate with
any shop that's selling fabric.
Any shop that's selling fabric. I always forget about fabric. Of course. Definitely. You can, there are iron vendors there, like at the...
Yeah, for pressing your blocks.
I'm like doing the movement, but I missed the word. For pressing. And there are all kinds of notion sellers and handmade makers that also come to these events that sell these handmade. What did I get? I got this really cool pop-up ironing board. That was amazing. Like you can collaborate in all types of ways with these different vendors that you meet at shows. You can also talk about and ask them about shows they're going to and learn about more opportunities. You can also, there's so much going on. We have a podcast. So next time we vend, which we have this in the back of our minds of vending later on together for the podcast, but you can go find vendors who also have a podcast and ask to get on their show and see if they're interested in collaborating that way. So it provides a wealth of networking and opportunity to visit and really get to know someone face to face.
One aspect that you forgot was the people that come to the show may hold positions in a guild and be looking for programs. And so obviously having your information about classes and workshop opportunities is a way to connect with those people as well. I know we had several conversations at the time with guild representatives, and an easy way to do that, both for newsletter signups and future classes, is to put your website up as a QR code, because everybody's got their phone out and they can quick snap a picture and link out to your website, and then they have your information, and it's a really easy way to capture and connect with people without getting drawn into a conversation. Because there are some people that just want to look, they don't want to engage, they, head down and do their shopping without that long conversation. So let them snap a quick picture and be on their way.
That's true. I also had, now that you said that, I remember having flyers for each type. I think I have 4 different flyers because I had one for my block of the month. I had one for guild representatives. I had one for color confidence. And then I had one for my mom who was teaching long arming. So I allowed her, because she came to work our booth and to help support me 8 months pregnant. So I really wanted to give her opportunity to talk about her own services. So she had one too. So we had little signs set up, and we had little postcard size takeaway flyers that people would come up and grab. Like Andi said, they don't want to talk to you. They just want to walk around, look, and they were picking up flyers. And then sometimes I would see them just like have a handful of flyers and like say, oh, I'm really interested in some of these, but I have a friend who's interested in this. And then I have this, but what about this? And I was like, oh, well, I can answer questions about that one particular thing you're interested in, but they're also taking information for stuff for later. So that was really valuable.
Yeah. So the bottom line idea is that exposure can kill you. It doesn't pay the bills, but there are definitely some beneficial aspects of getting your name out there and being known, even if you're not making a direct sale to every person that walks by.
Oh, we had a couple of quilt shop owners come over and ask us to send information about our patterns. So there was that too. So that was interesting.
Definitely with the networking aspect of other booths. But there are shop owners that come to shows and are not vending. So definitely network with those people, and just put on your best, even if you're an introvert having a vendor opportunity, put on your best, acting job and be that outgoing person that really wants to get into good conversation. And outside of vending and the quilt world, I took a kind of marketing class and got some really good ideas on conversation starters. And, you definitely want to keep things in mind that you don't ask questions that only get yes or no answers. You want to ask, where did you travel from? Get people giving you information that you can continue the conversation. What quilt category do you like the best, or some other aspect of tying it into the show or the local area will get people engaged.
One of my favorite questions you asked was, what brought you to the show today? I was like, that is a great question because their answers were so unique and they were so fun to listen to. And it gave you things to interact with. So it gave you those conversation threads that you can pull on and try out. Because we had people say, oh, I just saw it on the billboard and I thought it would be a fun thing to do this afternoon. To people who said, I traveled across the country to come to this and I am so excited to be here. And then you say, oh, where did you come from? How did you get here? Because people like talk about their travel and that's a fun way to see like, yeah, where they're coming from and really get to know the people that are in your booth. And it really helps. I'm just thinking like long term, it helps you with marketing because you said marketing and it hit my gears turning about how it helps you market to your own customers when you're able to pull those details out of them about where they're coming from. And you know who's buying in your booth if they're brand new quilters, if they're experienced quilters, because they will tell you if they're new or brand new or experienced or kind of in between. Especially if you ask like little questions like, have you done this method before? Have you seen this before? And then they might start asking you about different things that you can really get to know them, but also know how you can serve them. So it's really, that question was great for just pulling those little details out of people in a fun and interactive, like welcoming way.
Yeah, those are great conversation starters. One of the fun things to do at a show or a vendor opportunity is to actually meet those people in person that you've only been interacting with online. Obviously, Tori shared that the QuiltCon vending was the first time we met in person, but we had a meetup with our quilt pattern design group. So that was fun to meet those people. And just have those reunions with quilters that you may follow on Instagram and you now can see them in real life and, you know, go grab a bite to eat and visit a little longer.
I got to meet the first person that comes to mind again is Brenfield Awakening because I've been talking about her for a little bit. But I've also gotten to see people on Instagram. I didn't recognize them until they shared their Instagram handle with me and said, oh, I am so-and-so quilts. And I was like, oh, and that was really fun. Just to see the people who follow me and we follow each other really. And, but we never got to see each other before. So like you were saying, it was really interesting. And then I didn't get to go to the meetup. I was really sad because I was wiped again. I was 8 months pregnant. I was wiped out by the end of the day. And it was really fun to hear Andi talk about the designers that we've been interacting with on the Facebook group, Quilt Pattern Designers. And that's who met up. And I know there were a few other meetup groups. And I think it sounded like they had a blast meeting up and actually getting to know each other in person and having that opportunity to just socialize with grown-ups. Like, yeah. I mean, I have a toddler and a 5-year-old. So like the idea of going and being able to meet up with grownups and socialize with people who have the same interests, it's like mind blowing and exciting.
Yeah. And QuiltCon is really good about providing those opportunities because they have a swap event every year that people make mini quilts for each other. And then they have a meetup where you exchange the swap items. So that's a lot of fun to participate in if you are so inclined, because that's open to everyone. That's not just a vendor thing. So definitely do that. And then just there's so many different ways to make connections online and then follow that up with these in-person events. So definitely reach out and wear your Instagram handle on your shirt so people know that who you are, and definitely find Tori and I at events in the future. We look forward to meeting our audience in person.
And if you're shy about talking to people, we do have a shirt that has our logo. It's a small logo on the front, and on the back it says introverted but willing to discuss quilts. It's a fun shirt. I've worn it to 2 events now, and I've had people read the back of my shirt. Nobody's talked to me yet about quilts, but I'm really looking forward to it because I'm like introverted. I'm standing over here, but if you want to talk about quilts, I'm over here. Like,
yep.
Are you willing to talk?
Exactly. We should ask people, do you know the name of this quilt block that we use as our logo? And then that's a great conversation starter.
There you go. That would be fun. Any last pieces of advice about vending for our audience?
No, just do your research and take the plunge. It is a fun way to spend a few days out meeting other quilters.
Oh, one thing about setup and planning is your price sheet, and to definitely have a price sheet printed out and ready for you to reference so that, oh, and to couple with that, have someone else in your booth so that you can take breaks, because the shows are exhausting. They're high energy. They're constantly moving, constantly talking, trying to get a bite in when you can. So bring someone if you can. Collaborate, bring someone, even if it's just one day, bring someone, and then have your pricing sheet handy for them to reference. I had one with pictures. So it had pictures, prices, and a description so that they knew everything that was in the booth. And we also rounded prices to the nearest dollar. So it was easy.
Mm-hmm. And having those 5, 10, 20 price points are good, so that you don't have to make change. I know a lot of people are cashless society, and shows sometimes don't accept cash, but on the odd chance that people are paying cash, you want to have some easy ways to make change.
And make sure that your person who's helping you knows how to charge a card or take cash. They know your system. Yes. So they're not standing there going, oh, I don't know, she'll be back. Mm-hmm. They're able to help and really take those orders for you. So that was invaluable, especially for me in my pregnancy. That's come up a lot. But yeah, I really relied on the people in there helping me with the booth, because I was a little hung up.
People, if you don't have, extended family or business partnerships that you can do, reach out to your audience and see if someone is in the local area that could come in for even half a day, to like you said, give you that chance to go away from the booth, have something to eat, take your bathroom break, and watch the area. But definitely do that education with them so they know your products and your checkout system.
And vendors too. Like some vendors have 3 or 4 helpers in one booth, and if it's really slow, it's very easy for them to offer or to allow 1 or 2 people to go out and help the vendors around them, because everybody at a vendor event has usually vended before or understands what you're going through. And if you need a break, you're alone, they're very helpful, especially if they're right next door. Because again, you're going to be right next door to them for 3 days. So you really get to know them. They can't really go anywhere because, they're right there. So if anything happens, they're right there. So that's what's great about that. So feel free to ask around the vendors around you. And I throw that out there for my introverted people, because sometimes I'm afraid to ask for help. But ask the vendors around you for some help. They're always super nice and super willing to help.
Yeah, it's a great community. Just like 99% of quilters are delightful and ready to help. The same goes for the vendor space, even if they're not quilts, if it's some other craft related aspect. They understand, they're doing the same thing, they're in the same boat, so help each other out, and it becomes a great experience. And if you enjoyed this episode of Quilting on the Side, please leave us a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
And hit the subscribe button so you don't miss our next chat. Until then, remember to have fun in your business and do a little quilting on the side.